Yes, absolutely. So my name is Jana. I am working for Eden Project Communities as the England Network team leader. And Eden Project Communities is one of the projects or programs that is run by the Eden Project, which is obviously the tourist attraction, the biomes based in Cornwall. Do you want to
Great.
tell me a little bit more about the Eden Project and where we come from, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much that the Eden Project does. If people don't know, then I think they will know, but they won't know that they know. Basically, there's so much stuff that goes on with the Eden Project. Maybe do you want to start by perhaps how long you've been involved and the kind of things you've been up to recently? I know the big lunch was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Eden Project Communities for 4 years, and the Eden Project Communities program, well, we are pretty much the people behind a campaign called The Big Lunch. And The Big Lunch is our annual Thanksgiving Day for Neighbours. It's always happening first weekend of June, bringing people together up and down the country to have lunch with their neighbours and just to start creating connections in their local communities.
How did you find that with it being obviously COVID-19? Getting together with your communities around the table wasn't something which the government kind of advised you to do and wasn't safe to do. So how did you find it running that this year?
Well, obviously, as so many other things in our program, we just moved it online for now, just for safety reasons. So the big lunch this year in 2020, our big lunch weekend turned into the big virtual lunch. And we encourage people to either just do connect with people over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever technology they like, or just simply also using the actual phone, and just spend some time during that weekend to check in with friends and family, but also with their neighbours or people they may haven't talked to for a longer time, and share some food and some just building this connection and thinking about how you can build it virtually as well. There have been some social distancing big lunches, events or moments kind of over the garden fence, obviously with 2 meters apart and keeping the distance happening as well. But I think it was for us, it was important to showcase both ways in a sense, because obviously some people are still shielding, and even though the first week, well, this first weekend of June, you were already allowed to go out to a certain degree, but not encouraged to obviously mix with a lot of people. And there's also some people feeling quite anxious about it. And as a big lunch is all about creating connections, we felt we wanted to offer something which really had the ability to include everyone.
Yeah, cool. That's it is. The big lunch is a fascinating thing. If anyone hasn't heard of it, then I definitely suggest you go check it out. I mean, how many people do you usually get each year for that?
So in normal circumstances. So previously, in previous years, we had up to 6 million people involved all around who attended, big lunch events or participated, and often big lunches happening. So we try to encourage people to do it at the first weekend of June. Just sometimes it's nice to say, well, everyone is doing it at the same time. But we know big lunch events are happening all over during the summer. So, but obviously this year we don't really know. We just had a survey out to find out how many people have been involved this year. I would think it probably will be really different because there obviously was this feeling of we can't really do what we normally do, which is bringing people out together, quite often with street parties or in the physical world. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And of course you've there's obviously the big development going on at Morecambe, isn't there? I mean, how's that going? What's the latest on that one?
Oh, so Eden Project now is in Morecambe Bay. It's in partnership with Lancashire Enterprise Partnership, as well as Lancashire University, the City Council, and the County Council. I think what is happening with that is obviously there was an agreement around a land deal just happening in March, just before COVID-19 happened. But I think So I'm not on this team. So this is run by a separate company called Eden International. It is a very separate team. So I basically know as much as, you know, the public knows.
Yeah.
But I think there is a deep commitment towards this project. And one of the reasons for that is that Eden Project North is probably the closest project of all the different ideas and other projects Eden Project International is running, which is really the closest to what Eden Project is like in Cornwall, because it is really about a transformative project for a local community. So when the Eden Project was started 20 years ago, it was all about bringing opportunity and jobs and educational opportunities, and generally just this feeling of something great happening to a community which felt quite, well, you know, the inland communities in Cornwall actually are quite deprived. They really suffered from the closures of the mines, and as well as, you know, the decline in fishery. So bringing a project like the Eden Project there was quite deliberate. And I think that is the same what is happening now with Eden Project North. So I think there's a really strong commitment towards that project. But obviously, at the moment, quite things seem to be on hold. But I know there's a lot of work happening in the background.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a mammoth undertaking. I'm sure. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go down to Eden Project in Cornwall, and you kind of get a sense of the scale of it. And I think when you look at the photos, it doesn't really do it justice about the actual size of this thing. I see you've been down there yourself to the Cornwall.
Yes, I think what people often don't see about the projects are that it is really, for us, it is really about transformation. So we are an educational charity, and we are all about creating connections or reconnecting humans to each other and the living world through the power of transformation. So it is really all about demonstrating this huge transformation that we can all do together when we collaborate, and especially when we bring in the local communities into such development projects as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, I mean, the subject of communities is something which all the speakers so far have touched upon. The Bright Sky community at midday really focused on that one, and it's something, I suppose, which is why you know, links with Envirevolution so much, because it's something we really try and enshrine within our principles. And a question I put to the guys before was, how do you think COVID-19 is going to affect those community bonds? I know it's something which people are talking about a lot. You know, now we're emerging from COVID. You know, are we built back stronger? You know, those, you know, clapping the NHS on our doorsteps. You know, that wouldn't have happened a year ago. You know, does that show that we're closer together, or do you think that we've moved further apart?
Well, I'm very strongly in the closer together camp on this one, and it's a personal experience, but also the experience of working with our network of community-minded people from all across the UK. So this is something I'm hearing not just from, you know, where I live here in Nottingham, but also from people all over the UK saying, and because I think the last 3 months showed us two very distinctive different things. One is that they showed us that there is something about resilience, and that actually a lot of our communities already have a certain degree of resilience. Because when you think about how quickly community and community projects adapted and organized the response, that happened within days. In some communities, this was literally, people have to shield, 2 days later, here is the number you need to call if you need support. So there is already a degree of resilience. But obviously, we know that a lot of our communities are facing really strong challenges. I think the other thing, and a really positive thought that I hold, is that wherever you are, and I think there was a bit of a media story of like, oh, affluent communities are organizing and having a better response than, you know, more deprived communities. Well, it's not what I've seen happening. What I've seen happening is that informal networks of neighborly support that have been there, kind of underlying those communities before, have been just kind of reactivated to respond to the additional needs that their community then had. And for me, it's really, wherever you live in the UK, I think the last 3 months should have shown you one thing, and that is, in a crisis, there is someone living in your community who cares and who will be stepping up and going in and helping to try to support each other. I think that's very, very positive. I think the other thing which the last 3 months have shown us is also, obviously we are facing, COVID-19 obviously is one, it's a pandemic, which we kind of, some people were saying there might be a pandemic, be prepared, but we never knew what this will look like. And it's one of those risks which you don't feel like preparing for. I think everyone is like, oh, we don't know when this may or may not happen. However, there are challenges. We know that they will be happening. We know about climate change and obviously other, especially environmental or also economical crises that we know we're going to face and we know we have to face in our communities. I think there is something about, we have seen that people are ready to make change and to collaborate when necessary. Big question now is really, how do we rebuild our communities so that they are ready to face those challenges together as well?
Yeah, and I think I hit the nail on the head. It's that rebuilding, isn't it? But you said there's a lot of cause for hope, I think, isn't there, from the whole COVID thing. And I think you more than anyone at Eden Project Communities must have seen the best side of that, seen people rally together. I mean, that must have been fantastic just to see all the like I said, the help networks and stuff like that, which carry on going after that. So yeah, I mean, is there any specific examples of where you saw something which really stood out for you as a sort of a shining example of people working together?
Well, I think what you've seen is quite quickly. So what happened in a lot of places in community hubs and community centres, which obviously are all about creating connections, bringing people in, those have been shut. And there was, I think, the first week after COVID-19 happened, we had a call which we just put on Zoom, just an open call out to say, if you have been running a community hub or community centre, and you had to shut, just let's discuss what's happening, what's happening next. And there was a lot of, this will be really, really difficult, because a lot of community projects and hubs are now run as community businesses. So if they have to close, they lose their income. However, then really quickly afterwards, they started to transform and to say, well, we can use these spaces still to, organize food projects or organize help parcels, or where you may be packing the food parcels to then bring into to people who need it. So I think it was, you could see that happen really in a lot of places. But you also, what I found really positive is what you've seen is different community projects actually working together, because it wasn't so much this whole kind of, quite often, funding opportunities sometimes create a little bit of, you might be applying for the same funds as I do. So there's not so much of like, oh, we should collaborate. But this really was like, you have the space, you have already the volunteer base, you have kind of the ingredients, or you already have, food stock, which you need to get rid of. Let's just bring it together. And one of the examples, one of the social eating projects where I'm quite often go to, they had to shut because obviously you can't bring the community together for community meals. So they just simply gave all the food they had. They gave that then to another project, and this project then packed lunch boxes for children of key workers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's that necessity, isn't it, which kind of draws people to do, and it's great to see that people do, as much as people like to do, like have a doom and gloom outlook, people do the right thing a lot of the time. And I think there's a lot of good things out there, which is the Eden Project definitely shines a light on. Another thing which is obviously being very topical is the kind of Black Lives Matter and the movement around inequality in the UK. Yeah. I wondered how Eden Project Communities has faced up to those challenges. Is it something which you experienced within Eden Project? I know in the environmental sector generally it's a sort of open secret that the environmental sector struggles with representation from the Bay community. Have you any thoughts on that?
I guess as a overall sector, we are all struggling with representation to a certain degree. If it is coming from representation of people, like say from different parts of our communities or different backgrounds. I mean, I think a lot of our organizations are far too white, far too male, sometimes, and also sometimes far too middle class. So yes, I think it's an overall problem, and I think we also struggle with that and try to find ways of how to overcome that. I think when it comes to equality or inequality, which we see in our communities, there is something about that, especially with the big lunch, what we've seen is in some communities, it's all about, you see a nice street party, with the semi-detached houses and the bunting and the cupcakes. And that's all lovely. And it creates really positive impact, and they love it and they do it, and that's great. But for us, it is when the communities who may already struggle resource-wise, when they come together in the more deprived areas of the country, because a big lunch and the connection it creates, and often, the connections that are created with events like the big lunch, they then can lead to something where you actually put resources together to actually create impact for your wider community. And I think that's, so it is really positive for us to think, when we run our survey, what we see is that we are actually overrepresented in deprived communities, which I think is very positive, because this is where we want to create, where we think the need is greatest. But I think the other thing about inequality is obviously it is about communities talking about it. I think I've seen a program by a UK newspaper where they send people out and to take walks from outside of London. And one of the really scary thing in one of those programs was when I saw them going up to the northeast and interviewing all these amazing community people, and I thought, like, this is exactly the people we work with. They all said they're not going to vote, and I felt, that's, wherever you are on the political spectrum, but not taking part. And I think for me, it was personally, I find it quite scary to think these people who have such a transformative power in their own communities, not going to speak up or to take part in our political system. Well, that is something I think which, I find quite scary, and I wonder how we will be able to overcome inequality. I think it is about, building it up from the grassroots to give people a voice and to say you need to use that voice.
Definitely, I think reattaching people with their political power is would have a transformative effect on 100%. Yeah, like you said, it would give people, they have a voice when they go to the ballot box, don't they? And it's scary the amount of people who don't exercise that right. As a sort of young person, it frustrates me all the time that people my age don't get involved in voting.
I think it is about equality of opportunity, equality of possibility as well, isn't it? I think if you are fighting for your survival, then you're quite exhausted sometimes. So what we see, and I think that is, we see people who experience a problem in their community, say food insecurity or or pollution or whatever the issue is. People who have been at the suffering end of that problem quite often are the same people who then step up and say, we're going to build a project to overcome that problem. However, they then obviously focus on their local community where they want to see the impact created. I think it has a lot to do also with just, that is very exhausting to do. So the people we actually need to hear more from are the people who are already, completely overworked.
Yeah, I mean, the next question I was going to ask is kind of like where, in the years to come, how for you, what would a positive future look like? We've been hashtagging my future planet. For you, for Eden Project Communities, would that be it's funny, you're kind of one of them organizations where your ambition is to probably not exist because you don't want to have to be there. Your idea is you want communities to be able to do that kind of stuff themselves. So in your view, what would a positive future look like?
Yes, so I think again it's always this thing where you say, if my job is redundant, then that's a happy future. If there are no people needed to do certain jobs or roles, then communities doing it for themselves, then that's job done, great. For me, I think the positive future really lies in this overlap, and I think there are already a lot of great examples out there where you have a project that doesn't only focus, say, on the environmental impact, but also on the social impact, on the political or the economic impact. So I often use the example of things like transition towns or South East London Energy Cooperative. places or projects that, for example, when it comes to renewable energy community projects, it's not just about the green effect, it's also about the effect of, fighting energy poverty in a community. Or when you look at something like, Incredible Edible or other projects like super kitchens, which are not just about feeding people or doing, kind of like growing projects, but it is also really about the connection that creates, social connection created for volunteers. So I think for me, it is about when we see those things, not just as small community projects, but as ways how we want to live. When this becomes the norm, I think that is where we're coming toward this better future.
Yeah, it's like that kind of holistic view of it, isn't it? You need to kind of change the way things are, on many levels. And I think something which we've been learning about a lot of sustainability, it's not just environmental, it's social, it's economic as well. And I think that's what the Eden Project, which we've already alluded to today, kind of focuses on. It's picking people up who may have been neglected economically. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And is there anything else you wanted to touch on then before we've got 5 more minutes now?
No, I think what's one point is, I think my own experience. So I've been I worked as a campaigner for a long time, really focusing on bringing people in. And it was always about why don't they understand my work, especially on climate change issues. And I think there was a lot around, why don't they understand? Why are they not seeing the threat? And it was often because the solutions we kind of told them they needed to get behind were not to their benefit. And I think now, especially since I've been working with the Eden Project and Eden Project communities, I really see that bringing people in communities with us, creating positive impacts for communities as much as, say, a renewable energy project. I think this is the way forward for us, not just environmentally, but also democratically.
Okay, cool. Actually, yeah, it's an interesting point. Yeah, thanks for that. It's been really interesting chatting today. Actually, I mean, have you got any projects in the future? Anything which you want to direct viewers to with the Eden Project community?
Well, Carl, if you just check out Eden Project Communities on our Facebook page, we have loads of online Zoom workshops happening at the moment around all different kind of topics, and where we just start to chat with people about, especially around what community projects will be looking like now we're coming slowly out of lockdown. So if you're interested in that, just join us there and join one of our workshops.
It does sound really interesting. Yeah, and people can check that out on. I mean, we'll have links on our social media as well to the Eden Project communities. But yeah, we'll definitely tag in that. So if anyone fancies joining any of their workshops, then is it Eden Project communities on Twitter and Facebook? Is that right?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Eden communities on Twitter and on Facebook.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Diana. Well, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you giving you time for Saturday afternoon. Especially now it's the one day of the week where the weather's quite nice. I'm sure the places people want to be. But yeah, I really appreciate your time and all the best to the Eden Project communities in the future, and especially emerging out of lockdown. I really look forward to seeing what you guys come out with in the next few weeks.
Great, thank you so much, and I hope to visit you guys when the festival is happening again in Manchester next year.
Yeah, all right then. Well, I hope to see you then.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Cheers, Diana. Bye-bye.